Either hand over your bedroom to my wife, or start packing your things. Those were the exact words my son Daniel screamed at me during the family dinner I'd spent 3 hours preparing. He didn't whisper it quietly, didn't suggest it gently. He bellowed it across the table as though he were commanding a subordinate, as if the room I'd slept in for 23 years was somehow up for negotiation, as if I had forfeited my right to refuse in the house I owned. Rebecca, his wife, sat beside him wearing that calculated little smile she always had when she knew she'd get exactly what she wanted. My sister Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her chair but remained silent. My granddaughter Sophie bit her lip and stared down at her plate. Not a single person spoke up for me. Not one word of defense, not even a glance of support. And I. Catherine Hayes, 71 years old, widow, devoted mother for 45 years. I simply sat there feeling something inside me fracture in the strangest way. It wasn't grief that I felt. It wasn't even anger, not really. It was clarity. Pure, startling clarity. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could see the situation for exactly what it was. My own son was evicting me from my bedroom as casually as someone rearranging furniture, treating me like an inconvenience rather than his mother. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't plead or argue. Instead, I drew in a slow, measured breath, placed my fork and knife carefully on my plate, and spoke in a voice so steady it surprised even me. "All right, Daniel. I'll pack my bags then." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Daniel stared at me with obvious confusion, clearly expecting tears or protests. Rebecca let out an uncomfortable laugh. Margaret cleared her throat nervously. Sophie looked up with wide, startled eyes. But I had already risen from my chair, folded my napkin with deliberate care, and started walking toward my bedroom with my spine straight and my head held high. That evening, while they continued their dinner in the other room pretending everything was perfectly normal, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my trembling hands. I wasn't crying. I wasn't paralyzed by indecision. I was scrolling through real estate listings for coastal properties, something I'd never seriously considered before that moment. There was one particular listing that my closest friend Patricia had sent me several weeks earlier through text message. It was a charming little cottage with a wraparound porch and an unobstructed view of the sea. She'd written, "Catherine, look at this place. Imagine us sitting there with wine glasses watching the sunset someday." I'd responded with a laughing emoji, treating it like an impossible fantasy, a pleasant daydream, nothing more. But that night, with the sound of clinking silverware and forced cheerful conversation drifting from the dining room, I opened that message again and studied it with completely different eyes. The cottage was located 2.5 hours from the city. It featured 2 comfortable bedrooms, a spacious kitchen with modern appliances, and a price that, while substantial, fit perfectly within my carefully accumulated savings. Savings I'd built over decades of work. Decades of labor as an independent bookkeeper. Decades of setting aside every spare dollar after paying the household expenses. Decades of declining vacations, denying myself small luxuries, postponing things I wanted because there was always something more pressing. Daniel's university tuition, Daniel's first automobile, Daniel's elaborate wedding, the security deposit for Daniel and Rebecca's apartment when they came up short on funds. I took a screenshot of the property listing. I opened my banking application and reviewed my savings account balance. I had enough money. More than enough, actually. And for the first time in countless years, I thought something that made me feel simultaneously dizzy and liberated. This money belongs to me, and I can do whatever I choose with it. The following morning at precisely 7 o'clock, I dialed the real estate agent's number. A pleasant young woman with a professional tone answered promptly. I informed her I wanted to view the property that very same day. There was a brief pause on her line, then she responded, "Perfect, Mrs. Hayes, I can meet you at 11 this morning." I confirmed the appointment, disconnected the call, and stared at my phone screen, as though I'd just crossed some invisible threshold from which there was no return. Daniel came downstairs around 9, his hair disheveled, yawning loudly. He spotted me sitting on the living room sofa and frowned with irritation. "Is breakfast ready?" he asked without any greeting. "No," I answered without looking up from my phone. "I'm going out this morning." "Where are you going so early?" he demanded. "I have an appointment," I replied simply. He made an exasperated sound, walked to the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients as though this kitchen, this entire house, already belonged to him. "Well, don't be gone too long. Rebecca wants you to drive her to the shopping center later this afternoon." "I won't be able to do that," I stated firmly, rising from the sofa before he could respond further. Daniel looked at me strangely but said nothing more. I walked upstairs to my bedroom, the room that was now apparently Rebecca's according to last night's declaration, and selected clean clothes from my closet. I dressed thoughtfully. A pair of dark jeans Patricia had convinced me to purchase last month, a crisp white blouse, and my comfortable walking shoes. I examined my reflection in the mirror and saw a 71-year-old woman who still possessed clarity in her gaze and determination in the set of her jaw. I departed the house at 10:15. Daniel was watching television in the living room. Rebecca was still asleep upstairs. Nobody asked where I was headed. Nobody tried to stop me or even seemed particularly interested. I drove those 2.5 hours to the coast with my windows rolled down and an old playlist from my younger years filling the car. It had been years, literal years, since I'd driven anywhere alone for such a distance. It had been years since I'd done anything truly alone, if I was being honest with myself. There was always someone requiring something. Always a phone call, a favor, an emergency that only I could handle. But that day, driving down the highway with the wind whipping through my hair, I felt genuinely light for the first time in decades. I arrived at the cottage at exactly 11 o'clock. The real estate agent was already waiting. A middle-aged man, wearing a pressed white shirt, and carrying a warm, welcoming smile. "Mrs. Hayes, such a pleasure to meet you. Please, come inside and look around." The cottage was even more beautiful in person than in the photographs. Small, yes, but filled with natural light. The windows framed the ocean perfectly. The porch had ample space for a table and comfortable chairs. I could picture myself there so clearly, drinking morning coffee, reading novels, listening to the rhythm of the waves. "What do you think?" the agent asked expectantly. "I think it's absolutely perfect," I replied honestly. He smiled warmly. "Would you like a few days to consider the decision?" "No," I said with surprising firmness. "I want to make an offer today." The agent looked genuinely taken aback, as though he wasn't accustomed to such decisive clients. "Are you certain, Mrs. Hayes? This is quite a significant decision to make so quickly." "I've been making decisions for 71 years, I told him steadily. "This is simply the first one I'm making entirely for myself." He nodded slowly, still appearing somewhat surprised, but retrieved the necessary paperwork from his briefcase. He carefully explained all the details. The asking price was $195,000. I could arrange the wire transfer within 48 hours. The property was completely free of liens and ready for immediate closing. I nodded as he spoke, but mentally I was already calculating everything. I had $235,000 in savings. That would leave me $40,000 for whatever expenses came next. More than enough cushion for my needs. I signed the initial documents right there on the empty kitchen counter of that cottage that already felt like it belonged to me. The agent provided his business card, outlined the remaining steps in the process, and mentioned I could move in within 72 hours if I desired. "Perfect," I said without hesitation. "I'd like to move in 72 hours from now." I left the cottage with temporary keys clutched in my hand and stood on that beautiful porch gazing out at the endless ocean. The waves rolled in and retreated with such steady, predictable, peaceful rhythm. They didn't demand anything from anyone. They didn't require constant attention or sacrifice. They simply existed in their own perfect pattern. I pulled out my phone and captured a photograph of the horizon. I sent it to Patricia through text message with a simple caption. "I did it." She responded within seconds. "What did you do? Tell me immediately." "I bought the beach cottage," I typed back. There was a long pause, then messages started flooding in one after another. "You're not serious, Catherine. Please answer me. Did you actually buy the house? When did this happen? How is this possible? Does Daniel know about this?" I laughed quietly to myself standing on that empty porch. "Daniel doesn't know anything," I wrote back, "and I'm not planning to inform him until I'm already living here." Patricia called me immediately. I answered, and before I could even speak, she was already talking excitedly. "Catherine Hayes, I cannot believe you actually did this. I am so incredibly proud of you right now. Tell me everything that happened. What did Daniel say when you told him?" "I haven't told him anything yet," I explained. "Yesterday at dinner, he shouted at me that I either give Rebecca my bedroom or pack my belongings and leave. So I've decided to do exactly that. I'm going to pack my things and I'm leaving. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, then she sighed deeply. That boy has absolutely no idea who he just challenged, does he? No, I said, looking out at the vast ocean. He really doesn't have any idea at all. I returned to the city that same afternoon, driving more slowly this time, savoring the journey rather than rushing. When I arrived back at the house, it was approaching 6 o'clock in the evening. Daniel was sprawled in the living room watching some program on television. Rebecca was in the kitchen preparing something for dinner, using my cookware, my appliances, acting as though she already owned everything. "Where have you been all day?" Daniel asked without even glancing away from the screen. "Taking care of personal business," I replied, and walked directly upstairs to my bedroom. I closed the door firmly behind me and stood in the center of the room, surveying everything I'd accumulated over so many years. Framed photographs of Daniel as a young child, the wristwatch my husband had given me shortly before his death, the handmade quilt I'd purchased during a trip to the mountains, the stack of books on my nightstand, each one a cherished companion. Everything held a story, a memory, a fragment of my entire life. But somehow, none of it made me feel at home anymore. Not really. I pulled 2 large suitcases from the closet and began the process of packing, clothing first, then shoes, important documents, jewelry, photographs I genuinely cared about rather than ones I kept out of obligation. I worked in complete silence for several hours. Nobody came upstairs to check on me. Nobody knocked on the door to ask what I was doing. At 10 o'clock that night, Daniel shouted from downstairs, "Mom, are you planning to make dinner or what?" "No," I shouted back firmly, "order something for yourselves." There was stunned silence, then I heard muffled conversation. Probably Daniel complaining to Rebecca about my uncharacteristic behavior. But neither of them came upstairs. Neither of them insisted or demanded further explanation. They were simply accustomed to me, always yielding to their wishes, always fixing their problems, always being available whenever they needed something. I continued packing methodically. The next morning very early, I called Patricia. "I need you to do me an enormous favor," I said directly. "Anything at all," she responded without hesitation. "I need you to accompany me to meet with a real estate lawyer. I'm putting this house on the market for sale." There was a brief silence on her end, then Patricia said in a determined voice, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I ate breakfast alone in the quiet kitchen. Daniel and Rebecca were still sleeping in my former bedroom. I washed my coffee mug, dried it carefully and put it away in the cupboard. Then I searched my phone contacts for Linda Martinez, an attorney I knew from my neighborhood walking group. I sent her a text message. "Linda, I need urgent legal consultation regarding a property sale and updating my will. Do you have any availability this week?" She replied quickly, "I have time available today at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Does that work for your schedule?" "Perfect," I typed back immediately. Patricia arrived at precisely 9 o'clock sharp. She rang the doorbell and I stepped outside before Daniel could wake up and come downstairs. We embraced tightly at the door, and she looked into my eyes with that particular combination of concern and pride that only a friend of so many decades can express. "Are you absolutely certain about doing this?" she asked me seriously. "More certain than I've been about anything in my entire life," I answered. We drove to the real estate office together. The process moved faster than I'd anticipated. I listed the house at a fair market value, $345,000. The realtor explained that at that price point and location, the property would likely sell within 3 to 4 weeks at most. "Perfect," I said simply. Patricia took me to a nearby cafe afterward. We sat at a corner table by the window and she ordered 2 cappuccinos for us. "So what happens now?" she asked gently. "Now I wait for everything to finalize," I explained. "This house sale and the beach cottage purchase. When everything is settled and completed, I'm leaving. No dramatic farewell scenes, no lengthy explanations or justifications. I'm simply leaving this place behind, and Daniel is going to have to learn how to manage his life without using his mother as the permanent solution to every single problem he encounters." Patricia smiled and raised her coffee cup toward me. "I'll absolutely drink to that." We clinked our mugs together, as though they were champagne glasses celebrating something momentous. That afternoon, I went to my appointment with Linda. Her office was small but impeccably organized, filled with legal reference books and perfectly labeled filing systems. She greeted me with a firm professional handshake and offered me water. "Tell me what you need, Catherine," she said directly. I explained everything, The dinner confrontation, Daniel's shouted ultimatum, the purchase of the beach cottage, the decision to sell this house. She listened without interrupting once, taking careful notes on a legal pad. When I finished speaking, she set her pen down on the desk and looked at me with a serious expression. "Does Daniel know any of this yet?" she asked. "No," I replied. "And I don't want him to know anything until it's completely finalized and irreversible." "I understand completely," Linda said. "Legally speaking, he has no right to know anything. The house is registered solely in your name. Your savings are entirely yours. You're not married to anyone. You have absolutely no legal obligation to inform him of your financial decisions whatsoever." "Good," I said with relief. But Linda continued carefully. "I need you to think about something important here, Catherine. What happens if Daniel reacts very badly to this news? What if he attempts to sue you or make legal claims against your assets?" "Let him try if he wants to," I said firmly. "I don't owe him anything at this point. I gave him everything I had for 45 years. That's more than enough." Linda nodded approvingly. "Then we're going to do this properly and protect you completely. I'm going to prepare documentation that makes it crystal clear your assets belong to you, and any future transfers or gifts will be entirely on your terms. I'm also going to update your last will and testament." "My will," I repeated. "Yes," she confirmed. "Because if anything were to happen to you, I want you to have total control over who receives what portions of your estate." "Is there anyone besides Daniel you want to include?" "My granddaughter Sophie," I said immediately. "She's always been different from the others. She's always treated me with genuine affection, not out of obligation or expectation." "Perfect," Linda said, making notes. "I'll make sure she's included appropriately." I left that office feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Actual control. Control over my own life, over my money, over my future direction. The following days living in that house were profoundly strange. I was still physically present there, still cooking meals, still cleaning rooms, still doing all the tasks I'd always done. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. I no longer performed these duties on automatic pilot. I did them knowing that each passing day brought me one day closer to freedom from that place. Daniel and Rebecca had settled into my former bedroom, as though it had always rightfully belonged to them. Rebecca reorganized the entire closet, rearranged all the furniture, hung her clothing where mine used to hang. Daniel said absolutely nothing about any of it. He never asked how I felt sleeping in the guest room. He never asked if I was upset or hurt by the arrangement. He simply assumed I had accepted my diminished place in the household hierarchy. One afternoon while I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, Rebecca came downstairs carrying a handwritten shopping list. "Catherine," she said without any greeting or pleasantness, "I need you to go to the grocery store and purchase these items. Daniel and I are having some friends over on Saturday evening." She handed me the list without asking. I read through the items carefully. Expensive imported wine, premium aged cheeses, top quality cuts of meat, elaborate desserts from a specific upscale bakery. The total cost would easily exceed $250. "And who exactly is going to pay for all of this?" I asked without looking up from the paper. Rebecca stared at me as though the question itself was absurd. "Well, you obviously. It's your house after all." "Oh," I replied, folding the list carefully in half. "I thought it wasn't my house anymore. I thought it belonged to you now according to recent developments." She frowned with irritation. "Don't start with the dramatics, Catherine. You know exactly what I mean." "Yes, I know precisely what you mean," I said, handing the list back to her. "If you want to host a social gathering, that's perfectly fine. But you'll be paying for it with your own money." Rebecca's mouth literally fell open in shock. "What is wrong with you lately? Why are you acting like this?" "I'm not acting any particular way," I replied calmly. "I'm simply informing you that if you want to entertain guests, you can do so with your own funds." She made an exasperated sound and stormed out of the kitchen, calling loudly, "Daniel, your mother is being completely impossible right now." Daniel came down the stairs looking thoroughly annoyed. "What's the problem now?" he demanded. "Your mother says she refuses to pay for the food for our gathering on Saturday," Rebecca said, crossing her arms defensively. Daniel looked at me as though I were a difficult child throwing a tantrum. "Mom, don't be unreasonable about this. It's just one meal, nothing major." "Exactly," I agreed. "It's just one meal, which the two of you can easily pay for yourselves." "What has gotten into you lately?" Daniel asked, raising his voice with frustration. "You've been acting strange ever since last week. You talk back to us. You won't help with anything. It's like you're annoyed that we're even here." "I'm not annoyed that you're here," I said, looking him directly in the eyes. "I'm annoyed that you treat me like I'm your employee rather than your mother." "Nobody is treating you that way," Rebecca protested. "No?" I asked. "Then what exactly do you call what happened at dinner last week? What do you call shouting at me to pack my bags if I don't hand over my bedroom?" There was distinctly uncomfortable silence. Daniel looked away guiltily. Rebecca pressed her lips together tightly. "You're exaggerating everything, Mom," Daniel finally said. "I didn't shout at you like that. I just asked you to be reasonable about the situation." "You asked me to be reasonable," I repeated slowly, letting each word hang in the air. "By shouting at me in front of the entire family. Is that what you call reasonable?" "It was just a misunderstanding," Rebecca chimed in with that soft, conciliatory voice she used whenever she wanted to appear like the peacemaker. "We were all stressed that evening." "Daniel didn't mean to express it that way, but he did express it that way," I replied firmly. "And you two ended up with my bedroom. So I suppose the misunderstanding worked out quite well for you both." Daniel made an exasperated sound. "You know what? I'm not going to argue about this anymore. If you don't want to help with the food, then don't help. We'll figure something out ourselves." "Perfect," I said, and returned to what I'd been doing. They went back upstairs to their room, muttering complaints to each other. I heard fragments of their conversation. "She's become unbearable lately. I don't know what's wrong with her. She never used to be like this at all." They were absolutely right about that. I never used to be like this. I used to agree to everything they asked. I used to apologize for things that weren't remotely my fault. I used to live my entire life trying to please them and make them comfortable. But not anymore. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I went downstairs to the living room and sat on the sofa, with my phone glowing softly in the darkness. I opened my chat conversation with Patricia and typed, "Every single day I spend in this house makes me realize how much precious time I wasted being the person they expected me to be, instead of who I actually am." She replied immediately despite the late hour. "But you're not wasting any more time now, Catherine. Now you're taking it back for yourself." I smiled there in the darkness of the living room, feeling something shift inside me. The next day, the real estate agent called with news. "Mrs. Hayes, I have excellent news for you. I already have 4 people who've expressed serious interest in viewing your property. Can we schedule showings for this week?" "Yes, absolutely," I replied, "but I need them scheduled at very specific times, between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, when my son won't be home." The agent didn't ask any questions about that unusual request. He simply said, "Perfect, I'll arrange everything and send you confirmation." I disconnected the call and stared at my phone. This was really happening. It was actually, truly happening. On Wednesday morning, the first couple arrived to tour the house. Daniel and Rebecca had left earlier to run errands in town. I greeted the potential buyers warmly at the front door. A young couple, recently married, with that unmistakable excitement in their expressions that comes from searching for your very first home together. I showed them through every room with care. The spacious kitchen with updated appliances, the living room with excellent natural light, the small but well-maintained backyard garden. They asked thoughtful questions, took numerous photographs, measured various spaces with a tape measure. At the end of the tour, standing by the front door, they told me, "It's truly beautiful, ma'am. We're going to discuss it together and contact you very soon." 2 additional showings occurred that same week, all carefully scheduled while Daniel was absent. All ended with similar polite phrases. "We'll think it over carefully and let you know our decision." On Friday afternoon, Linda called me. "Catherine, all the documents are prepared and ready. Can you come in tomorrow to sign everything?" "I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning," I confirmed. On Saturday morning, while Daniel and Rebecca were still sleeping, I quietly left the house and drove to Linda's office. She greeted me with fresh coffee and a substantial folder filled with legal paperwork. "This is your updated last will and testament," she explained, pointing to the first thick document. "Sophie receives 65% of your total assets. Daniel receives 35%. And here's the specific clause stating that if anyone attempts to legally contest the will, they automatically forfeit their entire share completely." I signed every single page, experiencing a complicated mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I was finally protecting what belonged to me. Sadness because I had to legally protect myself from my own son. "How do you feel about all this?" Linda asked when I finished signing the last page. Like I'm finally waking up after a very long sleep, I replied honestly. That afternoon when I returned to the house, Daniel and Rebecca were in the living room having a tense, whispered argument. When they noticed me walk in, they immediately fell into awkward silence. "Where were you this morning?" Daniel asked with suspicion. "Out handling personal matters," I replied without offering details. "Out where exactly?" he pressed. "Taking care of important things," I said vaguely. He looked at me with clear suspicion but didn't push further. Rebecca, however, wore that particular expression she always had when she was calculating something. "Catherine," she said in an artificially sweet voice, "we really need to discuss something important with you." I sat down in the armchair across from where they were sitting. "About what?" "Daniel and I are being evicted from our apartment," Rebecca stated bluntly. "The property owner wants to sell the building and we have to be completely moved out within 2 weeks." "I'm sorry to hear that news," I said neutrally. "Are you already searching for another place?" "Well, actually," Daniel interjected, "we were thinking we could stay here for a while. After all, there's plenty of space in this house." "Here," I repeated flatly. "Yes," Rebecca said quickly. "It wouldn't be forever, obviously. Just until we find something suitable. A few months perhaps, maybe 6 at most." I looked at her directly, then shifted my gaze to Daniel. They were both watching me with that familiar combination of expectation and entitlement, disguised thinly as desperate need. "No," I said simply and clearly. "What?" Daniel asked, genuinely shocked. "No," I repeated. "You cannot stay here long term." "Mom," Daniel said, his voice rising with emotion, "we're your family. Are you seriously going to throw us out onto the street?" "I'm not throwing you anywhere," I replied calmly. "I'm allowing you to solve your own problems like the adults you supposedly are." Daniel shot to his feet. "I cannot believe what I'm hearing right now. What is wrong with you, Mom? When did you become so incredibly selfish?" "Selfish?" I repeated the word slowly, tasting it. "That's an interesting choice of words." "What else should I call it?" he said, throwing his hands up dramatically. "You have this entire house all to yourself, and you won't even help your own son in his time of need. This house isn't enormous, Daniel. It has exactly 3 bedrooms. One is mine, which you're currently occupying without my permission. Another is the guest room where I'm sleeping now because you took my room. And the third is my home office where I conduct the work that pays for this entire household. Then convert the office into a bedroom temporarily," Rebecca suggested as though it were the obvious solution. "It's really not that complicated." I stared at her incredulously. "My office is where I earn the income that pays the mortgage and all the bills for this property. Where exactly do you suggest I work instead?" "In the kitchen or something," she said with a dismissive shrug. "Don't be so dramatic about everything." I took a slow, deep breath to maintain my composure. "I'm not going to argue about any of this. The answer is no, and it's final." "Mom," Daniel said, shifting to a softer, more manipulative tone now. "I know you've been stressed recently. I know I might have said some things I shouldn't have during that dinner, but we're family. Families are supposed to help each other through difficult times. Families are also supposed to respect each other," I replied firmly. "And you haven't shown me genuine respect in a very long time." "That's not true at all," he protested weakly. "No?" I asked. "What do you call shouting at me to pack my bags if I won't give you my bedroom? Is that respect in your definition?" "I already apologized for that," he lied smoothly. He was lying completely. He had never apologized, had never even acknowledged what he'd done. But I knew inventing a fake apology was his standard method of escaping uncomfortable conversations. "No, Daniel," I said clearly, "you never apologized. You never even admitted you did anything wrong." Rebecca intervened with that victim-like voice she deployed so skillfully. "Catherine, we are genuinely in a very difficult situation right now. We have nowhere else to go. Are you really going to turn your back on us when we need you most?" "You are both adults with jobs and income," I replied steadily. "You can rent another apartment, you can apply for a loan, you can do what millions of people do every single day when they need housing. You can figure it out." "But you're his mother," Rebecca insisted. "Mothers are supposed to help their children no matter what." "And I did help," I said, rising from the armchair. "I helped for 45 years continuously. I paid for your university education, Daniel. I bought you your first car. I loaned you money for your wedding expenses. I've helped you with rent payments more times than I can even count anymore. I've helped more than enough. I cannot believe you're being this way, Daniel said, his voice trembling as he pretended to be on the verge of tears. My own mother denying me a roof over my head when I'm desperate. I'm not denying you a roof, I said, walking toward the staircase. I'm denying you my roof. There's a significant difference between those two things. I went upstairs to my temporary room and closed the door firmly. I could hear Daniel and Rebecca talking downstairs, their voices escalating in volume. I caught stray words floating up. Ungrateful, selfish, bitter old woman who doesn't care about anyone. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my phone. I texted Patricia. It just happened. They asked to move in permanently. I told them no. She replied with a voice message, her tone sounding genuinely proud. Catherine Hayes, you are absolutely my hero. How did they react to that? Exactly as expected, I typed back. They called me selfish and heartless. Oh please, Patricia replied in another voice message. Selfish is what they've been to you for their entire adult lives. You're just finally setting healthy boundaries. That's not selfishness, that's survival. I smiled at the screen. Thanks, Patricia. I needed to hear that. That night, Daniel and Rebecca left the house without informing me where they were going. They returned very late, well after midnight. I heard them climbing the stairs heavily, entering my old bedroom, and closing the door with more force than necessary. On Sunday morning, I woke early as had become my habit. I went down to the kitchen and made coffee only for myself. I no longer prepared breakfast for everyone. I no longer set the table for 3 people. I simply served my own cup, my own toast, my own fruit. Daniel came downstairs around 11, looking like he'd barely slept. He saw me sitting at the table reading news on my tablet and said nothing initially. He went directly to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup, and stood leaning against the counter just staring at me. What? I asked without looking up. Nothing, he said. I'm just wondering what happened to you recently. What happened to me? I repeated. Yeah, he said. You used to be different. You used to care about your family and their well-being. I set the tablet down on the table and looked at him directly. I used to care so much about my family that I completely forgot about myself and my own needs. That's the difference you're noticing. He made a scoffing sound. That sounds like something you read in a cheap self-help book somewhere. It sounds like something I should have understood 30 years ago, I replied evenly. Daniel slammed his coffee mug down on the counter with a sharp crack. You know what, Mom? Do whatever you want. You've always done whatever you wanted anyway. I actually laughed. A short, almost bitter sound. Daniel, if I had done what I truly wanted, I would have traveled the world extensively after your father died. I would have pursued the graduate degree I always dreamed of. I would have lived alone peacefully, but no. I stayed right here taking care of you, helping you constantly, waiting endlessly for you to value me even just a little bit. I do value you, he said, but there was no conviction behind the words. No, Daniel, you use me. And there's an enormous difference between valuing someone and using them. He fell silent, because he knew, somewhere deep down, that I was absolutely right. Rebecca came downstairs a few minutes later, already fully dressed with perfect makeup, and that air of superiority she constantly carried around like a shield. Good morning, she said without looking in my direction. Good morning, I replied neutrally. She poured herself coffee and sat beside Daniel. They both completely ignored my presence, talking to each other in low voices as though I wasn't even there in the room. Catherine, Rebecca said suddenly, we need to use your car today. Ours is having mechanical problems. No, I said simply. What do you mean no? She asked with disbelief. I mean I'm not lending you my car. And how exactly are we supposed to get around then? Daniel asked. In a taxi, in a rideshare, you can walk. There are numerous options available. Rebecca let out a harsh, dry laugh. This is absolutely unbelievable. First you won't let us stay here, and now you won't even lend us your car. What's next? Are you going to start charging us for the air we breathe in your house? If you'd prefer, you can leave right now and breathe air somewhere else, I said without emotion. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. Enough. This is enough, Mom. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this behavior is too much. What's gotten into me, Daniel, is that I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from being invisible. I'm exhausted from being treated like household help. I'm exhausted from you assuming that everything I own automatically belongs to you as well. Nobody assumes that, Rebecca said, but it was a transparent lie. No, I asked. Then tell me, Rebecca. Why are you sleeping in my bedroom? Why are you using my kitchen as though it's yours? Why do you automatically assume I'm going to pay for your parties and lend you my possessions? She opened her mouth but no words emerged. I stood up from the table, washed my coffee mug, and left the kitchen without another word. I went upstairs to my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed and took several long deep breaths to calm myself. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from the real estate agent. Mrs. Hayes, excellent news. The young couple who toured on Wednesday wants to make an official offer, $325,000. Are you interested in accepting? I replied immediately. Yes, I accept their offer. Perfect, he wrote back. I'll prepare all the paperwork. We can finalize the sale in approximately 1 week. 1 week. In just 1 week, this house would no longer belong to me. And Daniel still had absolutely no idea what was coming. That afternoon, while they were upstairs in their room, I went downstairs and started packing items discreetly. Photographs I genuinely wanted to keep, books that held meaning for me, important documents. I placed everything carefully in boxes that I hid in the guest room closet. Daniel and Rebecca didn't notice anything. They were too consumed with their own dramatic problems. On Monday morning, while Daniel and Rebecca were still sleeping, I quietly left the house with 3 packed boxes in my car. I transported them to a storage unit I'd rented the previous week. It was a small space, just sufficient to hold the essentials until I moved to the beach cottage permanently. The employee at the storage facility helped me register and handed me the access keys. Are you moving a lot of belongings? She asked pleasantly. Just the important things, I replied simply. I returned home before noon. Daniel was in the living room with his laptop supposedly working. He watched me enter but said nothing at all. I went straight upstairs to my temporary room and continued organizing my belongings. That afternoon I received a message from Linda. Catherine, the buyer for your house wants to accelerate the closing date. They can be ready by Thursday. Does that work with your schedule? I stared at the message for several long seconds. Thursday, 3 days away. In just 3 days, this house would officially stop being mine. Perfect, I typed back. Thursday works fine for me. I immediately called Patricia. I need you to come with me on Thursday to the closing, I said. I'll absolutely be there, she said without any hesitation. Do you know when you're moving to the beach? Friday morning, I replied. I'm signing the house sale on Thursday afternoon, and Friday morning I'm gone from here forever. And Daniel? She asked carefully. Daniel is going to find out on Thursday night, when it's too late for him to do anything about it. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Are you absolutely certain you want to handle it that way? Completely certain, I said firmly. If I tell him beforehand, he'll try to manipulate me, try to make me feel crushing guilt, try to convince me not to go through with it. I've made my decision, and I'm not allowing him to change it. You're right, Patricia agreed. You're so much stronger than you give yourself credit for, Catherine. I'm learning to be, I replied quietly. The next few days felt surreal. I was still physically living in that house, walking through those familiar hallways, cooking in that kitchen. But mentally I was already gone. I was already at the beach in my new cottage, living my new life. Daniel and Rebecca noticed my emotional distance, but they misinterpreted it as temporary anger. They assumed that eventually I'd get over it, that I'd return to being the same compliant, accommodating mother I'd always been before. On Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca attempted a different strategic approach. She came into the kitchen while I was preparing lunch, wearing a forced smile. Catherine, she said in an artificially sweet tone, I know things have been tense between us lately, and I want you to know that I'm genuinely sorry about that. I looked at her without saying anything, waiting. Really, she continued earnestly. Daniel and I have been so stressed about the apartment situation, and I don't think we've been fair to you at all. I said, continuing with my food preparation. What I mean is, we truly value everything you do for us, and we want to make it up to you somehow. Make it up to me? I asked skeptically. Yes, exactly, she said, pulling out her phone. Look, I found this spa that offers an all-day package. Massages, facial treatments, everything. I thought maybe we could go together this weekend, you and me, like friends bonding. I looked her straight in the eyes. Who's paying for this spa day, Rebecca? She blinked uncomfortably. Well, I thought maybe you could treat us both, as a gesture of reconciliation and... No, I interrupted firmly. I'm not treating you to anything. Her fake smile vanished instantly. "It was just an idea," she said sharply. "You don't have to be rude about it." "I'm not being rude," I replied. "I'm being clear. I'm not going to spend my money buying you things so you can pretend to appreciate me afterward." She opened her mouth, looking offended. "I'm not pretending anything at all." "Yes, you are, Rebecca. And we both know it perfectly well." She left the kitchen muttering something I couldn't quite hear. I didn't care anymore. On Wednesday night, Daniel tried his own approach. He knocked on my door around 10 o'clock. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Go ahead," I said. He entered and sat awkwardly on the edge of the bed. I was folding clothes, packing the last few items into my suitcase. "Mom," he said in a tired voice, "I don't want us to keep fighting like this." "We're not fighting, Daniel," I replied without looking at him. "I'm just no longer willing to let you disrespect me." "I never wanted to disrespect you at all," he protested. "But you did," I said, stopping and looking directly at him. "You did it when you shouted at me during that dinner. You did it when you took my bedroom without even asking if I was comfortable with it. You did it every single time you assumed I would automatically solve your problems." He ran his hands over his face in frustration. "I don't know what else you want me to do. I already said I was sorry." "You haven't said you're sorry, Daniel. You've said you're sorry that I'm upset. Those are two completely different things." He fell into silence. "You know what the real problem is?" I continued. "You think that by simply saying sorry, everything magically returns to the way it was before. But it doesn't work that way. You can't disrespect someone and expect them to just forget it immediately." "It wasn't my intention to make you feel bad," he said, and for the first time he sounded genuinely sincere. "But you did make me feel bad," I replied. "And good intentions don't undo the actual damage caused." He nodded slowly. "What can I do to fix this?" "Nothing, Daniel. It's too late to fix it now." He looked at me with obvious confusion. "What does that mean?" "It means I've already made important decisions about my life and I'm not changing them." "What decisions?" he asked. "You'll find out very soon," I said, and continued folding my clothes. He sat there for several more minutes, clearly waiting for me to say something else. But I didn't. He finally stood up and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. I barely slept that night. Tomorrow was Thursday. Tomorrow I would sign away this house. Tomorrow everything would change forever. I woke very early, dressed carefully. Black pants, a white blouse, my pearl earrings. I wanted to look good and feel confident for the significant moment. I went downstairs and made coffee. Daniel and Rebecca were still sleeping. I left a brief note on the kitchen table, went out to handle business. Back this afternoon. Patricia picked me up at exactly 9 o'clock. I got into her car, and before starting the engine she looked at me seriously. "Ready?" she asked. "More than ready," I replied with certainty. We drove straight to the title company's office. The buyers were already there, a young man in his late 30s with his wife. We greeted each other formally and sat around the closing agent's large conference table. The agent methodically read through all the documents in that monotone voice lawyers always seem to have. He explained the terms, the conditions, the important dates. The buyers were paying $325,000. The transaction would be completed today. I had until Sunday evening to completely vacate the property. "Any questions?" the agent asked, looking around the table. "None," I replied clearly. I signed every page one after another, my name in careful cursive. Catherine Hayes. Sealing the end of an entire era of my life. When I finished, the closing agent handed me a certified check, $325,000. I held it in my trembling hands, feeling the weight of absolute freedom. Patricia squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes shining with pride and emotion. We left the title company's office around noon. Patricia embraced me tightly on the sidewalk outside. "You actually did it," she said softly. "You really, truly did it." "Yes," I replied, and I was surprised to feel tears forming in my eyes. They weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of pure relief. "Want to get some lunch before you head back?" Patricia asked gently. "Yes," I said. "I want to celebrate properly." We went to a small restaurant we both loved, one that overlooked a peaceful park. We ordered white wine and pasta. We raised our glasses in a toast to new beginnings, to second chances, to freedom. "When are you going to tell them?" Patricia asked carefully. "Tonight," I replied. "When I get home this evening. Do you want me to come with you for support?" she offered. "No," I said. "This is something I need to do alone." I returned to the house around 5 in the afternoon. Daniel's car was parked in the driveway. I took a long deep breath before opening the front door. I walked into the house and found Daniel and Rebecca in the living room watching television. They both looked up when they saw me enter. "Where were you all day?" Daniel asked with mild irritation. "Taking care of important business," I replied, setting my purse on the dining room table. "What business?" he pressed. "Personal matters," I said vaguely. His expression showed that familiar annoyance I knew so well, but he didn't pursue it further. I went upstairs to my room and sat on the bed for several long minutes, preparing myself mentally for what came next. At 7 o'clock, I came back downstairs. Daniel was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich. Rebecca was still in the living room, phone in hand, scrolling mindlessly. "Daniel, Rebecca," I said from the kitchen doorway. "I need to speak with you both, it's important." Daniel set the knife down on the counter. "About what now?" "Come to the living room, please, both of you." They followed me, their expressions showing a mixture of curiosity and irritation. We sat down, them on the sofa together, me in the armchair facing them. I took a deep breath and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "I sold this house." There was absolute stunned silence. Daniel stared at me as though he hadn't understood the words I'd just spoken. Rebecca blinked repeatedly, her mouth slightly open. "What did you just say?" Daniel finally asked. "I said I sold the house," I repeated calmly. "I signed all the paperwork this morning. The new owners take full possession on Sunday evening." Daniel shot to his feet. "What? You can't do that. You can't just sell this house." "I already did," I replied evenly. "This is my house too," he shouted. "I grew up here. This is my childhood home. You can't just sell it without even consulting me first. This house is registered solely in my name, Daniel. I don't need to consult you or anyone else about anything." Rebecca stood up as well, her face flushed. "Wait just a minute. And where exactly are we supposed to live now?" "That's your problem to solve, not mine," I replied firmly. "Our problem?" Daniel repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. "Mom, you just made us homeless. You literally just made your own son homeless." "You haven't had a home here for over a week now," I said. "Ever since I told you clearly that you couldn't stay here long term. The problem is that you simply didn't believe me." "This cannot be happening," Rebecca said, starting to pace back and forth. "This has to be some kind of joke." "It's not a joke at all," I said. "You have until Sunday evening to remove all your belongings." "No," Daniel shouted. "I'm not accepting this. I'm going to contact a lawyer immediately. I'm going to contest this sale legally." "You can certainly try," I replied calmly. "But the house was in my name alone. There are no debts, no mortgage, and the sale is completely legal. I've already consulted with my own attorney about everything." "Your lawyer?" Daniel asked incredulously. "Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since I decided it was time to protect what belongs to me," I answered. Rebecca pointed an accusing finger at me. "You are a selfish, cruel old woman." I looked at her without even blinking. "Tell me, Rebecca, am I selfish because I sold my own property? Or am I selfish because I wouldn't let you continue using me indefinitely?" "Using you?" Daniel yelled. "We're your family, and I am your mother," I said firmly. "Not your permanent solution to every problem you encounter in life." Daniel ran his hands through his hair, clearly desperate and panicking. "Mom, please. There has to be a way to fix this situation. Cancel the sale. Tell them you changed your mind. Tell them you made a mistake." "I'm not canceling anything," I said. "But we have nowhere to go," he said, his voice breaking. "Then you'd better start looking for a place immediately," I said, rising from the armchair. "You have 3 full days." Daniel blocked my path physically. "I'm not letting you do this to us." "Move aside, Daniel," I said in a low, firm voice. "Not until you explain what the hell is wrong with you," he said angrily. "Who are you?" "This person standing here isn't my mother." "You're absolutely right," I replied. "This isn't the mother you knew before. That mother got tired of being invisible. That mother got tired of being taken for granted. This mother decided to finally live for herself." I gently pushed past him and walked up the stairs calmly. I heard Rebecca screaming from downstairs. "This isn't over. We're going to sue you. We're going to fight this." "Go ahead," I called down from the top of the stairs. "Talk to whatever lawyers you want." I went into my room and locked the door securely. I sat on the bed and waited for my heart to stop pounding so violently. I had done it. I had told them the truth, and somehow the world hadn't ended. My phone rang. It was Patricia calling. "Did you tell them?" she asked immediately. "Yes," I replied, "just now." How did they react? She asked. Exactly as expected, I said. Shouting, threats, drama, accusations. Are you okay? She asked with concern. I'm perfect, I said, and was genuinely surprised to realize it was completely true. I didn't sleep at all that night. I could hear Daniel and Rebecca arguing late into the night, their voices rising and falling in waves, alternating between rage and panic and desperation. At one point I heard Rebecca crying. Daniel called someone on his phone, probably a lawyer, but from what I could overhear through the walls, they told him exactly what he already knew deep down. The sale was perfectly legal. Friday morning, I went downstairs to the kitchen very early. Daniel was already sitting there at the table with a cold cup of coffee in front of him. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes and his hair was disheveled. Mom, he said when he saw me enter, we need to talk, really talk this time. We talked yesterday, I replied, pouring myself fresh coffee. No, not like that. Really talk, without yelling or accusations, please. I sat down across from him at the table. I know I messed up badly, he said, staring down at his coffee mug. I know I said horrible, unforgivable things to you. I know I treated you terribly. Yes, you did, I agreed simply. And I'm sorry, he said. I'm genuinely, truly sorry for everything. I looked into his eyes carefully, searching for sincerity. What I found was desperation and fear. Daniel, I said softly, the problem isn't just what you said at that one dinner. The problem is that dinner was simply the final straw that broke everything. It's been years, literal years of you treating me like I exist only to solve your problems and make your life easier. It's not like that at all, he protested weakly. Yes, it absolutely is, I insisted gently. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you visited me just because you wanted to see me, not because you needed something from me? He fell into uncomfortable silence. Exactly, I said. You don't remember because it's never happened. I'll change, he said desperately. I promise you I'll be a better son. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't need you to be a better son anymore, Daniel. It's too late for that now. What I need is to live my own life without feeling like I owe someone something all the time. And what am I supposed to do? He asked, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. What all adults do, I replied. You'll figure it out somehow. Rebecca came downstairs at that moment, also showing dark circles and disheveled appearance. She looked at both of us, then poured herself coffee without saying a single word. The atmosphere in the house that Friday was tense and suffocatingly silent. Daniel and Rebecca spent most of the day in their room making phone calls, searching for available apartments, talking to potential landlords, desperately trying to relocate their lives. I continued packing my belongings methodically and calmly. Every object I packed represented one step closer to my freedom. In the middle of the afternoon my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Hayes? A young woman's voice said. Yes, this is she, I replied. It's Sophie, your granddaughter. Hi, sweetheart, I said, my voice softening immediately with genuine affection. Grandma, she said, and she sounded worried. My dad called me earlier. He told me you sold the house. Is that actually true? Yes, Sophie, I replied honestly. I sold it. It's completely true. There was a pause. Then she said something that shocked me. Good. Good? I asked, surprised. Yes, good, she repeated firmly. I heard what my dad said to you at that dinner last week. I was sitting right there, remember? I was so embarrassed and so angry, but I didn't know what to say or how to help. I felt a lump forming in my throat. What you did is right, Grandma, Sophie continued. You deserve to live your own life. You deserve respect and kindness. And if my dad won't give that to you, then you absolutely deserve to get away from here. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. Where are you going to go? She asked. I bought a cottage by the beach, I replied, small, peaceful, with a beautiful ocean view. That sounds absolutely wonderful, she said warmly. Can I come visit you sometime? She asked shyly. Anytime you want, Sophie. You will always, always be welcome. After hanging up with Sophie, I sat in my room looking out the window. Hearing her support and understanding had been like receiving a warm hug after days of coldness and conflict. At least someone in this family understood what I was doing and why. Saturday dawned overcast and gray. I woke early and continued my packing. I already had 5 full suitcases and 7 sealed boxes ready. Patricia was coming later to help me transport everything to the storage unit. I went downstairs to the kitchen and found Rebecca sitting at the table with her laptop open. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she'd been crying all night. "Good morning," I said neutrally. She didn't even look up. She didn't respond at all. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. The silence was thick and uncomfortable. "We found an apartment," Rebecca said finally, still not looking at me. "It's awful. Tiny, old, in a terrible neighborhood, but it's the only thing we can possibly afford on short notice." I said nothing, just listened. "It costs $1,400 a month," she continued bitterly. "More than double what we were paying before. And they want 2 months' deposit plus the first month's rent. That's $4,200 we don't have anywhere." She kept talking as if I was going to offer to help financially, as if this entire situation was still somehow negotiable. "We're going to have to borrow money from my sister," she said, finally looking at me directly. "She'll never let us forget that she had to bail us out of this situation." "You're still waiting for me to offer to pay for it, aren't you?" I asked directly. "You're his mother," Rebecca replied, as though that explained everything. "I thought you'd at least care about what happens to him." "I do care about Daniel," I said firmly. "What I don't care about is continuing to be his permanent bank and problem solver for issues he creates himself." "We didn't create this situation," she said, raising her voice. "You created this. You're the one who left us homeless." "You had a home," I replied calmly. "An apartment you were renting, which you lost because you couldn't manage your finances properly." "That's not my fault or responsibility. We could have stayed here and figured things out," she insisted. "No, you couldn't stay here," I said. "This is my house, and I decided to sell it." "That's my right." "You're cruel," Rebecca said, her voice trembling. "I always thought you were a good person, but you're actually cruel and heartless." I looked at her directly. "Do you know what's truly cruel, Rebecca? What's cruel is shouting at someone to pack their bags in their own home. What's cruel is taking someone's bedroom without asking permission. What's cruel is assuming someone exists only to serve you and fix your problems. What's cruel is treating your mother-in-law like hired help." "I never did that," she protested. "Yes, you did," I said. "From the very first day you entered this family, you treated me like an employee, not like family." Rebecca slammed her laptop shut angrily. "I'm not arguing with you anymore. You've already won. You've humiliated us completely. You've made it crystal clear you don't want us here. It's not about wanting you or not wanting you," I said quietly. "It's about me no longer sacrificing my peace of mind for your comfort and convenience." She grabbed her laptop and stormed out of the kitchen without another word. Patricia arrived at 10 in the morning with her large SUV. Together we started carrying boxes and suitcases down the stairs. Daniel came out of his room when he heard the noise. "What are you doing?" he asked. "You're not even waiting until Sunday?" "There's no reason to wait any longer," I replied simply. He stood on the stairs watching me carry one box after another past him. He didn't offer to help. He just watched with an expression somewhere between confused and deeply hurt. Patricia and I made 3 trips to the storage unit. On the last trip, as we closed the back of her SUV, Patricia said, "Tomorrow's the big day, your moving day." "Tomorrow I leave forever," I confirmed. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. "Light," I replied honestly. "Like I've finally shed a weight I've been carrying for decades." We returned to the house at noon. Daniel and Rebecca were packing too. I saw their boxes in the living room, piles of clothes everywhere, scattered objects. The house that had been my home for so many years now looked like a place being systematically dismantled. I went upstairs to my room and removed the last few items from the drawers. Old photographs, letters, important documents, everything fit into one small box. It was surprising how little I actually needed when I really thought about it. That night, I made dinner just for myself, a simple plate of pasta with vegetables. Daniel and Rebecca ordered takeout and ate in their room. We didn't see each other at all that evening. Around 9 o'clock, someone knocked softly on my door. It was Daniel. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. "Go ahead," I said. He came in and stood awkwardly near the door. "You're leaving tomorrow," he stated. "Yes," I confirmed. "Do you know where you're going?" he asked. "To the beach, to my new cottage." "You bought another house," he said, not really a question. "Yes, I did." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "How long have you been planning all of this?" "Since the night of that dinner," I replied. "Since you yelled at me in front of everyone." Daniel looked down at the floor. "I didn't think you'd actually go this far with it." "Neither did I admitted. "But once I made the decision, I knew it was the right one." "Is there anything I can say to make you change your mind now?" he asked desperately. No, Daniel, not anymore, it's too late. He nodded slowly, accepting it. Are you going to be okay all alone in a new house, far from everything you know? I'm going to be better than I've been in years, I said with complete conviction. And us? He asked. What about us? You're going to have to learn to be okay without depending on me for everything, I said gently but firmly. Daniel ran his hand over his face. He was quiet for so long I thought he might have left, but he was still standing there leaning against the wall. I'm sorry I failed you, he finally said in a low voice. I looked at him and saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine vulnerability and pain. I'm sorry for many things too, Daniel, I replied. I'm sorry I didn't set boundaries much sooner. I'm sorry I allowed you to treat me this way for so long. I'm sorry I confused love with endless sacrifice. He looked up at me. Do you not love me anymore? He asked, his voice breaking. I love you, I said. You're my son and I will always love you. But I'm not going to let that love destroy me anymore. I'm not going to let it consume my entire life. Daniel nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, he said quietly. His words hurt, but not in the way they used to. They didn't pierce my chest with paralyzing guilt anymore. They just hurt the way any uncomfortable truth hurts. That's okay, Daniel, I said. I don't need your forgiveness. What I need is my peace and my freedom. He left the room then, closing the door very softly behind him. That night I slept deeply and peacefully for the first time in weeks. There was no anxiety keeping me awake, no insomnia, no tossing and turning wondering if I was doing the right thing. I knew with absolute certainty that I was. Sunday dawned bright and sunny. I got up at 6 o'clock. I showered and dressed in comfortable clothes for the long drive ahead. I brought my last 2 suitcases downstairs and placed them by the front door. Daniel and Rebecca were still sleeping. Patricia arrived promptly at 7 o'clock. We loaded the suitcases into her SUV efficiently. Then I went back into the house for one final look around. I walked through every room slowly. The living room where Daniel had taken his first steps as a toddler. The kitchen where I'd prepared literally thousands of meals over the years. The backyard where my husband used to read the newspaper on Sunday mornings. Every corner held memories, but somehow none of those memories made me want to stay. I went upstairs to what had been my bedroom. Rebecca had completely transformed it. She'd changed the curtains, moved all the furniture, hung new artwork on the walls. There was nothing of mine left in there anymore. Perfect, I thought to myself. I went back downstairs and found Daniel in the living room. He'd woken up and was standing there in his pajamas, looking like he hadn't slept at all. You're actually leaving, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I replied simply. Can I at least have your new address, he asked. I'm going to give it to Sophie, I replied. If she decides to share it with you, that's her decision to make. Daniel clenched his jaw. So that's how it's going to be between us. That's how it's going to be until you can prove you can respect my boundaries, I said clearly. He didn't reply to that. I walked to the front door. Before leaving, I turned around one last time. Take care of yourself, Daniel, I said. You too, Mom, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. I walked out of the house and closed the door behind me. I didn't look back. There were no tears this time, just a long, deep, liberating sigh. Patricia was waiting for me in the SUV with a huge smile on her face. Ready for your new life? She asked. More than ready, I replied. We drove those 2.5 hours to the coast listening to music, laughing freely, planning all the things we were going to do in the new cottage together. Patricia was staying with me for the entire weekend to help me get properly settled in. We arrived at the beach cottage around 10 in the morning. The sun was shining brilliantly on the ocean, and the sound of the waves was the only thing you could hear. Patricia turned off the engine, and we both sat for a moment just looking at the cottage in silence. It's yours, Patricia said softly. It's all yours now. It's mine, I repeated, and the words sounded absolutely incredible coming out of my mouth. We got out of the SUV and I opened the front door with my new keys. The cottage smelled fresh and clean, like a genuine new beginning. The windows let in beautiful natural light that brightened every corner. It was small, yes, but it was utterly perfect. Patricia and I spent the rest of the day unpacking everything. We put my clothes in the closet, arranged the furniture I'd purchased the previous week, hung a few cherished pictures on the walls. By late afternoon, the cottage already felt like a real home. We sat on the porch with a bottle of white wine, watching the sunset together. The sky was painted in impossible shades of orange and pink as the sun slowly sank into the horizon. "Here's to you," Patricia said, raising her glass high. "To the bravest woman I know." We clinked our glasses together and drank in comfortable silence. "Do you think Daniel will be okay eventually?" I asked after a while. "Eventually he'll be fine," Patricia replied thoughtfully. "But that's not your responsibility anymore, Catherine. You need to remember that." "I know," I said. "But he's still my son. That doesn't just disappear. And you're still a person who deserves to live without constant guilt," she said firmly. "You're still someone who deserves peace and happiness." She was absolutely right. I knew it intellectually. But decades of being a mother don't simply get erased overnight. That night, after Patricia went to sleep in the guest room, I stayed on the porch alone looking up at the stars. I took out my phone and captured a picture of the dark ocean lit only by the moon. I sent it to Sophie with a simple message. "I'm home now," she replied immediately with a heart emoji, then added, "I'm so happy for you, Grandma. I'll come visit very soon." I smiled at the screen. Then another message arrived. It was from a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized the area code immediately. It was Daniel. "Mom," the message read. "Jessica and I got the apartment. We're moving in tomorrow morning. Just wanted you to know." I didn't reply, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because there was simply nothing to say. Another message arrived 5 minutes later. "I know you're angry with me and I understand why, but I hope someday we can talk again." I put the phone away and went back to watching the ocean peacefully. The following days were filled with a peace I honestly hadn't experienced in years. I woke to the sound of waves every morning, ate breakfast on the porch, walked along the beach, read books, and cooked just for myself. There was no yelling, no demands, no crushing guilt hanging over everything. Patricia stayed with me all week. In the afternoons we'd walk along the boardwalk, visit the charming local markets, try small restaurants. It felt like being on a permanent vacation from my old life. On Wednesday, while we were having coffee at a cafe facing the ocean, my phone rang. It was Margaret, my sister. "Catherine," she said when I answered. "I need to talk to you about something." "Hi, Margaret, what's wrong?" I asked. "Daniel told me everything, about the house, the move, all of it," she said. "Uh-huh," I said neutrally, bracing myself for a lecture. "And I want you to know that I am completely on your side," she said firmly. I was quiet, genuinely stunned. "What Daniel did to you at that dinner was absolutely horrible," Margaret continued. "I was sitting right there, I heard everything he said, and I was ashamed of myself for not saying anything. But I was in shock. I couldn't believe my nephew would speak to his mother that way." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, feeling relieved. "You did the right thing by leaving," she said emphatically. "You did the right thing selling that house. Sometimes family hurts you more than strangers ever could, and you don't have to stay just because they're family. You're allowed to choose yourself." Margaret and I talked for almost an hour. She told me she'd spoken directly to Daniel, that she'd told him exactly what she thought of his behavior. She said Daniel had gotten defensive at first, but eventually admitted he'd been wrong. "He's scared now," Margaret explained, "scared that he's lost you permanently. But he still doesn't fully understand that he caused this entire situation himself." "Someday maybe he'll understand," I said, "or maybe he won't. But either way, it's not my problem anymore." When I hung up, Patricia looked at me curiously. "Who was that?" "Margaret," I replied. "She called to tell me I did the right thing." Patricia smiled warmly. "The universe is lining up in your favor, Catherine." That afternoon while we were walking on the beach, I received another message. This time it was from Rebecca. It was a surprisingly long message. It started by saying she never thought things would escalate this far, that she'd also grown up with a difficult mother, and maybe that's why she didn't realize when she was crossing boundaries. That she was genuinely sorry for making me feel invisible in my own home. She didn't apologize directly exactly, but it was close enough. "I don't know if you and Daniel can ever fix your relationship," she wrote at the end. "But I want you to know that I understand why you left. I understand why you needed to do this." I read the message 3 times carefully, then showed it to Patricia. "Are you going to reply?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "I need more time to process everything." Patricia nodded understandingly. "You have all the time in the world now, Catherine. That's the whole point." On Friday, Sophie video called me. Her face appeared on the screen with a huge, bright smile. "Grandma," she said enthusiastically, "you look so good. You look genuinely happy." "I am happy," I replied honestly. I turned my phone around to show her the stunning view of the ocean from the porch. She gasped. "It's absolutely beautiful, Grandma. I'm so proud of you for doing this." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said warmly. "How are you doing?" I asked. "I'm good," she said. "I went to help my dad with the move yesterday. The apartment is definitely small, but it's clean and decent. I think they're going to be okay eventually." "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "Dad asks about you," Sophie said hesitantly. "He doesn't know if he should call you or give you space. Tell him he can call me when he's ready to have a real honest conversation," I replied. "No yelling, no manipulation, no guilt trips, just genuine honesty." Sophie nodded. "I'll tell him that." We spent the rest of the video call talking about her college classes, her part-time job, her life. She told me she'd started going to therapy to process some family dynamics. She said her therapist had told her it was important to set healthy boundaries with people. "Just like you did, Grandma," she said. "You set boundaries and respected yourself. That's what I'm learning to do too." I felt incredibly proud of her. On Saturday afternoon, Patricia had to return to the city for work. We said goodbye with a long, tight hug at the door. "Are you going to be okay here alone?" she asked with concern. "I'm going to be absolutely perfect," I replied. "If you need me for anything, call me anytime," she said. "I know," I said. "Thank you for everything." I watched her drive away in her SUV, then went back into my cottage. My home. Those words still filled me with wonder every single time I thought them. That night, sitting on the porch with a glass of wine, my phone rang. It was Daniel calling. I hesitated before answering. Finally, I swiped the screen. "Hello, Daniel," I said. "Hi, Mom," he said. He sounded exhausted. "Can we talk for a few minutes?" "Go ahead," I said. There was a long pause. Then I heard him take a deep, shaky breath. "I've been thinking constantly this week," he said. "About what happened, about what I said to you, about how I've treated you over the years." "I'm listening," I said, not making it easy for him. "You were right," he said finally. "About everything. I treated you like you were just my solution for every problem. I yelled at you when I should have respected you. I took your space as if it was my right. And I never, ever asked you how you were doing or what you needed." I didn't respond. I let the silence work for me. "And I know apologizing isn't going to magically fix everything," he continued. "I know I caused damage that will take a very long time to heal. But I want you to know that I am genuinely sorry. I am truly, deeply sorry." His voice cracked at the end. "Thank you for saying that," I replied calmly. "I needed to hear it." Do you think you can ever forgive me?" he asked. "I don't know, Daniel," I said honestly. "I really don't know yet." He took a shaky breath. "I understand that. But what I do know," I continued, "is that I am not going back to living the way I did before. I'm not going to be the mother who says yes to everything. I will not sacrifice my peace for your comfort. I will not let you take advantage of my love. I'm not going to ask you to," he said. I don't know. I want to have a relationship with you, a real one. Not one where I only call when I need something." "I'd like that too," I said. "But it's going to take considerable time. And it's going to require you to actually change your behavior, not just say you're going to change." "I will," he promised. "I'll show you with actions, not just words." We hung up shortly after. There were no exaggerated promises, no instant reconciliation, no dramatic declarations, just a small first step toward something that might someday become a healthier relationship. I stayed on the porch late into the night, listening to the ocean, feeling the salt breeze on my face. For the first time in literal decades, I wasn't thinking about what someone else needed from me. I was just present, here, now, with myself. The following week I settled into a routine that filled me with deep satisfaction. I woke early and walked on the beach before the tourists arrived. The exercise was good for me physically. It cleared my mind and gave me energy for the rest of the day. I met other women who also walked in the mornings. Women around my age, some widows, some divorced, all searching for the same thing I was: peace, connection, a life of their own making. We formed an informal walking group. We'd meet at 7, walk for an hour, then have breakfast together at different cafes along the boardwalk. One of them was named Helen Carter, a 67-year-old woman who'd been a high school principal for 40 years. She told me she'd moved to the beach after retiring, tired of living in the city, tired of her family's endless expectations. "It's funny," she said to me one morning over coffee. "We spend our entire lives taking care of everyone else, and when we finally decide to take care of ourselves, they call us selfish." "Exactly," I replied, as if having your own life is somehow a crime. We became fast friends. Helen introduced me to her social circle, women who played cards on Tuesday evenings, who attended yoga classes on Thursday mornings, who hosted dinner parties on Saturday nights. They welcomed me with open arms and genuine warmth. For the first time in years, I had a social life that didn't revolve entirely around my family. I had friends who called me to go out, not to ask for favors. I had plans that I made because I wanted to, not because someone else needed them. A month after I moved, Sophie came to visit for a weekend. She arrived on a Friday afternoon with a small backpack and a radiant smile. "Grandma," she said, hugging me tightly, "this place is absolutely incredible." I showed her every corner of the cottage. She took pictures of everything: the porch, the ocean view, my bedroom, the kitchen. Then she posted one picture on her social media with a caption that read, "Visiting the bravest woman I know." That night we cooked together. We made fresh fish I'd bought at the market that morning, a crisp salad, fragrant rice. We ate on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky. Sophie told me about college, about her friends, about a boy she'd started dating. It was so completely different from the dinners at my old house. There was no tension, no unspoken demands, no resentment floating in the air. There was just genuine conversation between two people who truly loved each other. "How's your dad doing?" I asked eventually. Sophie set her fork down carefully. "He's okay, different than before, quieter, more thoughtful. I think he's really processing everything that happened." "And Rebecca?" I asked. "Also different," she said. "Less demanding, I guess. Like she had some kind of realization too." "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. Sophie looked at me with those dark eyes, so much like my own. "Dad really wants to visit you here," she said, "but he's afraid you'll say no." "I won't say no," I replied. "But I'm not ready yet, I need more time." "I understand," Sophie said, "and he'll understand too when I tell him." On Saturday I took Sophie to my favorite local spots. The artisan market with handmade crafts, the bakery with the best pastries I'd ever tasted, the scenic viewpoint that overlooked the entire bay. She fell in love with the town just as much as I had. "I could actually live here," she said as we walked along the boardwalk. "It's so peaceful, so beautiful." "Anytime you want, sweetheart," I said, "you will always have a room waiting for you here." Sophie left on Sunday afternoon. We said goodbye with a long embrace. "Take care, Grandma," she said, "and don't let anyone ever make you feel bad for choosing yourself." "Never again," I promised firmly. I watched her drive away and went back into my cottage, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and satisfaction. Nostalgia for the days when Sophie was little, and I was the grandma who spoiled her. Satisfaction because now our relationship was between two adults who genuinely respected each other. 2 months after I moved, I received a package in the mail. It was from Daniel. Inside was a handwritten letter and a framed photograph. The photo was of Daniel when he was about 5 years old. We were at a park somewhere. He was riding on my shoulders, both of us laughing with pure joy. I'd completely forgotten that photo even existed. The letter read, "Mom, I found this picture while unpacking boxes. It made me remember who you always were for me, my refuge, my support, my everything. And it made me realize when I stopped treating you like that. I don't know at what exact point I started seeing you as a resource instead of a person, but I know it was deeply wrong. I'm going to therapy now. My therapist is helping me understand patterns I repeated without even realizing it. Patterns of taking without giving, of demanding without thanking, of assuming instead of asking. I'm not writing this to ask you to come back or to forgive everything immediately. I just want you to know that I'm working on being better, for myself, for Rebecca, and someday, I hope, for you too. I love you, Mom. I've always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it without asking for something in return. Daniel." I read the letter 3 times. I cried a little, but not from sadness. From hope. Maybe my son really was changing. Maybe moving away had been the best thing I could have done. Not just for me, but for him too. I took a picture of the letter and sent it to Patricia. She replied quickly, "Real progress. But don't let your guard down completely yet. She was right. Real change takes considerable time and consistent effort. 3 months after I moved, I hosted a small gathering at my cottage. I invited my walking group friends, Helen, Patricia, who came from the city, and 3 other women I'd met in my yoga class. We cooked together, laughed freely, drank wine, told our stories. Every single one of us had a similar story to tell. Women who had given so much that they'd forgotten themselves completely. Women who had finally decided to live. A toast, Helen said, raising her glass, to the women who dared to choose themselves, to those who said enough is enough, to those who chose peace over guilt. We all raised our glasses, the sound of clinking glass mixed with our laughter and the endless sound of the ocean. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone on the porch with a cup of herbal tea. I took out my phone and opened my notes app. I wrote, "Today marks 3 months since I moved here. 3 months since I made the hardest and most necessary decision of my entire life. 3 months since I stopped living for others and started living for myself. And what I've discovered is this: I am not selfish for loving myself. I am not a bad mother for setting boundaries. I am not cruel for protecting my peace. I am human. I am a woman who deserves dignity, respect, and tranquility. And finally, after 71 years, I understand that." I saved the note and looked at the dark ocean lit by the full moon. Daniel called me once a week now, short conversations, asking for nothing, just checking in to see how I was. There was still some awkwardness between us, but there was also something new and precious: respect. Rebecca had sent me flowers on my birthday with a simple card that just said, "Happy birthday, Catherine. I hope you're doing well." It was a small gesture, but significant nonetheless. Sophie visited me once a month. We had become closer than we'd ever been before. And I, Catherine Hayes, continued to wake up every morning to the sound of the ocean, continued to drink my coffee on the porch, continued to walk on the beach with my new friends, continued to build a life that was entirely, completely mine. One morning, as I was walking along the water's edge with my bare feet sinking into the wet sand, I thought about everything I'd left behind and everything I'd gained. I had left behind a house full of memories, but empty of respect. I had left behind a version of myself that existed only to serve others. I had left behind the guilt I'd been taught to carry my entire life. And I had gained so much. I had gained peace. I had gained dignity. I had gained time for myself. I had gained true friends. I had gained my own life back. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the sky in impossible, beautiful colors. I stopped walking and just watched the beauty, feeling completely present in the moment. A wave came in and washed over my feet. I smiled. Finally, after so many years of taking care of others, wondering what they needed, what they wanted, how I could help them, I was finally asking the most important questions. What do I need? What do I want? How can I help myself? And the answers were simple but profound. I need peace. I want freedom. I can help myself by choosing myself, always. I took out my phone and captured a selfie with the sunrise behind me. My hair was messy from the ocean wind. My face was bare of makeup, showing wrinkles that told the story of 71 years of life. But my eyes were shining in a way they hadn't shined in decades. I sent the photo to Sophie with a simple message: "Good morning from paradise." She replied instantly with heart emojis, then added, "I love you, Grandma. You're my inspiration." I put the phone away and kept walking along the shoreline, because that was exactly what I was doing now, moving forward toward the life I deserved, toward the peace I'd searched for. Finally, after so many years of being a mother, a wife, a caregiver, a problem solver, after so many years of being everything to everyone except myself, I was the one deciding who deserved my care and attention, and I had chosen to take care of me. 4 months into my new life, something unexpected happened. I was at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, examining fresh vegetables, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Excuse me," a man's voice said. "Aren't you Catherine Hayes?" I turned around to find a man about my age, maybe 70, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. "I am," I said. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "Thomas Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "We met years ago at a community event. You did my taxes one year when I was starting my consulting business." The name clicked. "Oh yes, I remember now," I said, shaking his hand. "That must have been 15 years ago at least." "Closer to 20, he said with a laugh. But I never forget a face. What brings you to this part of the coast? I live here now, I said. I moved here a few months ago. Really? He said, genuinely pleased. I retired here 3 years ago myself. Small world. We ended up having coffee together at a nearby cafe. Thomas was a widower, had lost his wife to cancer 5 years prior. He had 2 grown children who lived across the country. He'd moved to the beach for the same reasons I had. Seeking peace, a fresh start, a life of his own. It's strange, isn't it? He said, stirring his coffee. Spending your whole life building something, taking care of everyone else, and then suddenly you're free to do whatever you want. It's liberating but also a bit terrifying. I know exactly what you mean, I replied. I spent 45 years being a mother first, a person second. Learning to reverse that order has been challenging but necessary. We talked for over 2 hours. About our lives, our families, our hopes for this next chapter. When we finally said goodbye, he asked if I'd like to have dinner sometime. I'd like that very much, I said, surprising myself. As I drove home, I found myself smiling. I wasn't looking for romance necessarily, but the idea of companionship, of someone who understood this phase of life. It felt nice. It felt possible. That evening I called Patricia to tell her about Thomas. Catherine Hayes, she said with delight. Are you telling me you have a date? It's not a date exactly, I protested. It's just dinner with a friend. It's a date, she insisted. And I'm thrilled for you. This is what living looks like, Catherine. This is what you deserve. 5 months in, I received a letter from Daniel, not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter that arrived in my mailbox. Dear Mom, it began. I've been in therapy for 3 months now. It's been harder than I expected. Looking at yourself honestly, at the patterns you've created, at the hurt you've caused. It's painful. But it's necessary. My therapist helped me understand something important. I wasn't just asking you for help. I was demanding it. I wasn't just leaning on you. I was using you as a crutch. And worst of all, I had convinced myself that this was normal, that this was what mothers were for. Rebecca is in therapy too. We're working on ourselves individually and together. We're learning to solve our own problems, to communicate better, to take responsibility for our lives. The apartment is small, but we're making it work. We've actually become closer through this struggle. We've had to rely on each other instead of relying on you, and that's been good for us. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect you to come back or to fix things between us immediately. But I want you to know that I'm changing. Really changing. Not because I want something from you, but because I need to be a better person. I miss you, Mom. I miss our conversations, even though I realize now how one-sided they always were. I miss your cooking, even though I realize I took it for granted. I miss you, even though I realize I never truly appreciated you when I had you close. I hope someday I can visit you. I hope someday we can build something new. Not the old relationship where I used you, but a new one based on mutual respect. I love you. I'm sorry, I'm trying, Daniel. I read the letter sitting on my porch as the sun set. Tears rolled down my cheeks freely. These were different tears than before. Not tears of pain, but tears of hope mixed with lingering sadness. I took out my phone and called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Mom, he said, his voice filled with surprise and hope. I got your letter, I said. And, he asked nervously. And I think you're on the right path, I said honestly. I'm proud of you for going to therapy, for doing the work. That takes real courage. Thank you, he said quietly. Does this mean maybe I could visit sometime? Not yet, I said gently. But maybe soon. Let's keep talking on the phone. Let's rebuild slowly, carefully. Let's make sure the changes are real and lasting. I understand, he said. I can wait. I'll wait as long as it takes. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness feeling something shift inside me. Forgiveness wasn't a single moment or decision. It was a process, a journey. And maybe, just maybe, we were starting that journey together. 6 months after moving, I had dinner with Thomas for the 3rd time. We'd been seeing each other casually. Walks on the beach, coffee dates, dinner at small restaurants. Nothing serious, nothing rushed, just companionship and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. Over dinner that night at a restaurant overlooking the bay, he asked me something unexpected. Catherine, he said, what made you finally leave? What was the moment you decided enough was enough? I thought about it carefully before answering. It wasn't just one moment, I said. It was an accumulation of moments, years of moments where I felt invisible, taken for granted, used. But the final straw was when my son shouted at me to give up my bedroom or leave. And I realized, I'd rather leave than continue living that way. That took incredible strength, Thomas said. It didn't feel strong at the time, I admitted. It felt terrifying. But sometimes the scariest thing and the right thing are the same thing. He reached across the table and took my hand. I'm glad you did it, he said. I'm glad you found your way here. Me too, I said, squeezing his hand back. 7 months in, Sophie graduated from college. The ceremony was 2 hours away from my cottage. I drove there early that morning, my heart full of pride. I hadn't seen Daniel and Rebecca in person since I'd left. They were going to be there too. I was nervous but determined not to let that ruin Sophie's special day. I arrived at the venue and found Sophie immediately. She ran to me and hugged me tightly. You came, she said. Of course I came, I replied. I wouldn't miss this for anything in the world. Dad and Rebecca are here too, she said carefully. Is that okay? It's fine, I said. This day is about you, not about our complicated relationships. When I finally saw Daniel, it was across a crowded lawn. Our eyes met. He looked different, thinner, more tired, but somehow more present. He raised his hand in a small wave. I waved back. After the ceremony, we all went to lunch together. Sophie's request. It was awkward at first, everyone too polite, too careful. But gradually, as Sophie told stories about college and her plans for the future, the tension eased. Congratulations on your graduation, I said to Sophie, raising my water glass. Everyone joined in the toast. As we were leaving the restaurant, Daniel approached me alone. Mom, he said, thank you for coming today. It means everything to Sophie. And to me, she's my granddaughter, I said simply. Of course I came. You look good, he said. Happy, healthy. I am, I replied, both of those things. I'm glad, he said, and I could tell he meant it. I'm really glad. He didn't ask to visit. He didn't push for more than this moment. And I appreciated that restraint more than he knew. 8 months in, Helen from my walking group invited me to join a book club she'd started. 8 women meeting every 2 weeks to discuss novels, drink wine, and talk about life. I'd never been part of a book club before. I'd never had time for something like that. But now, I had nothing but time. Time to read, time to think, time to connect with other women who understood this phase of life. Our first meeting was at Helen's house. We discussed a novel about a woman who'd reinvented herself after divorce. The parallels to our own lives were obvious, and we spent as much time talking about ourselves as we did about the book. One woman, Margaret Ann, said something that stuck with me. We're all here because we finally chose ourselves, she said, and society tells us that's selfish, especially for women. But you know what? I'd rather be selfish and happy than selfless and miserable. Amen to that, another woman said. We all raised our wine glasses in agreement. 9 months after moving, I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that familiar crushing guilt, the guilt that had followed me for decades. Guilt about not doing enough, not being enough, not sacrificing enough. It was simply gone. I stood on my porch with my morning coffee, watching the sunrise, and felt something I'd never quite felt before. Complete contentment. Not happiness exactly, though I was happy. Not just peace, though I certainly had that. It was contentment. A deep satisfaction with exactly where I was and who I'd become. My phone rang. It was Patricia. Happy 9-month anniversary, she said cheerfully. You remembered, I said with a laugh. Of course I remembered, she said. 9 months ago you did the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. How are you celebrating? I'm standing on my porch drinking coffee and watching the ocean, I said. That's celebration enough. I'm coming to visit next weekend, Patricia announced. We're going to have a proper celebration. I'd love that, I said. 10 months in, Thomas and I had become quite close. We weren't living together or anything that serious, but we spent several evenings a week together. He'd become my companion, my confidant, someone who understood me. One evening as we walked along the beach at sunset, he asked me, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving the way you did?" Not for a single moment, I answered honestly. I regret that it had to come to that. I regret that my relationship with Daniel got so broken that leaving was the only option. But I don't regret choosing myself. I don't regret finding peace. Good, he said. You shouldn't. Do you regret moving here? I asked him. After your wife passed? Never, he said firmly. I needed to start over somewhere new, somewhere without memories of her in every corner. I needed to learn who I was without her. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, I said. 11 months after moving, Daniel called and asked if he could visit. Not with Rebecca, just him, just for an afternoon. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. Okay, I said. You can come. Really? He asked, his voice full of hope and surprise. Really, I confirmed. But Daniel, this isn't me saying everything is fixed. This is just a visit, a conversation, that's all. I understand, he said. That's all I'm asking for. He came on a Saturday afternoon. I watched his car pull up and felt my heart racing. I hadn't been alone with him since the day I'd left. He got out of the car and just stood there for a moment, looking at the cottage, looking at the ocean. Then he walked up to the porch where I was waiting. Hi, Mom, he said. Hi, Daniel, I replied. We sat on the porch for a while in silence, just watching the waves. Finally he spoke. This place is beautiful, he said. I can see why you chose it. It chose me, really, I said. I was just ready to find it. He nodded. Mom, I've rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times. But now that I'm here, it all seems inadequate. Just speak from your heart, I said. He took a deep breath. I was a terrible son, he said. Not just at the end, but for years before that. I took advantage of your love. I treated you like a resource instead of a person. I assumed you'd always be there, always say yes, always fix things. And I never stopped to think about what that cost you. Tears were forming in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so incredibly sorry. Not just for what I said at that dinner, but for years of taking you for granted. For years of not seeing you. For years of not appreciating you. I felt my own tears starting. Thank you for saying that, I managed to say. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just want you to know that I see now. I finally see what I did, and I'm ashamed. We sat there crying together on that porch, the sound of the ocean mixing with our tears. I do forgive you, I finally said. Not because everything's okay, but because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. I forgive you, Daniel. But I won't forget. And I won't go back to being who I was. I don't want you to, he said firmly. I don't want the old relationship back. I want to build something new. Something healthier. Something based on respect. That's what I want too, I said. He stayed for 3 hours. We talked about everything. His therapy, his marriage, his job, his life. And for the first time in perhaps his entire adult life, he asked about me. About my life here, my friends, my routines, my happiness. When he left, we hugged at his car. Can I come again, he asked. Maybe in a month? Yes, I said. You can come again. I watched him drive away and felt something settle inside me. We weren't fully healed. We might never be fully healed. But we were trying, and that was enough for now. 1 year after moving, I threw a party. I invited everyone who'd become important in my new life. Patricia, Helen and the walking group, the book club women, Sophie, Thomas, even Daniel and Rebecca. The cottage was filled with laughter and conversation and good food. People spilled out onto the porch, onto the beach. The sun set in a blaze of color as we all raised glasses for a toast. Patricia stood up to speak. 1 year ago, she said, my dear friend Catherine did something extraordinary. She chose herself. She chose peace. She chose life. And in doing so, she inspired all of us to examine our own lives and make our own brave choices. To Catherine, everyone echoed. I stood up, overwhelmed with emotion. Thank you all for being here, I said. A year ago, I left behind a life that was killing me slowly. I left behind guilt and obligation and endless sacrifice. And I found something I'd been searching for my entire life, myself. I looked around at all these faces. New friends, old friends, family. This is what life is supposed to be, I continued. Connection without obligation, love without sacrifice, peace without guilt. I'm 72 years old and I finally understand what it means to truly live. Everyone applauded. Daniel came up to me afterward, his eyes shining. I'm proud of you, Mom, he said. For the first time in my life, I'm truly proud of you. Not for what you did for me, but for what you did for yourself. Thank you, I said, hugging him. That means more than you know. That night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up with Thomas's help, I stepped out onto the porch one more time. The ocean was dark and vast, the stars brilliant overhead. Thomas came out and stood beside me. Happy anniversary, he said softly. Thank you, I said, leaning against him. Any regrets, he asked. None, I said firmly. Not a single one. We stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the eternal rhythm of the waves. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, exhausted, invisible, taken for granted. And I thought about the woman I was now, rested, visible, valued. They were barely recognizable as the same person. I'd spent 71 years learning how to take care of others. And I'd spent this last year learning how to take care of myself. Both skills were important. But I'd learned them in the wrong order. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app one last time. I wrote, "Today marks 1 year since I chose myself. 1 year since I learned that loving yourself isn't selfish. 1 year since I discovered that you can't pour from an empty cup. 1 year since I started truly living." To anyone reading this someday, it's never too late. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to set boundaries. It's never too late to walk away from what's hurting you and walk toward what heals you. I am 72 years old. I spent most of my life being who everyone else needed me to be. And now, finally, I am simply being who I need me to be. And that, I've discovered, is enough. More than enough. It's everything. I saved the note and put my phone away. The ocean continued its endless rhythm, constant and unchanging. But I had changed. Profoundly, permanently, beautifully changed. I was home. Not just in this cottage by the sea, but in myself. And for the first time in my entire life, that was exactly where I wanted to be. The waves rolled in. The stars shone overhead. Thomas squeezed my hand gently. And I smiled, knowing with absolute certainty that I had finally found what I'd been searching for all along. Not a place, not a person, not a situation. But peace. True, lasting, hard-won peace. And I would never, ever give that up again.